So I had this idea to create some cool, gritty, distressed vector graphics using my laser printer, Blender marker, and the free Adobe Capture app on my iPhone. Sounds a little complicated, but it's not really. There's this technique where if you print something out on a laser printer, put it on top of another sheet of paper, and then use a Blender marker to trace over it, it'll transfer that toner onto another sheet of paper. But because of that transfer, you get a little bit of grit, a little bit of uneven coverage, and just gives it that DIY, punk, distressed, vintage look. Now, in the Adobe Capture app, there is a feature where you use your camera and you can just like look at something and then it'll convert it into a vector shape, which is kind of crazy. So I'm thinking if we do the transfer and then use the camera, it'll capture it into a vector shape with that texture, and then we'll be able to use it in Fresco. So this would be a way to get some authentic texture that's also vector in Fresco. And I think it might work. So there's only one way to find out. Let's do it. So I have this design that I've just been noodling with that I'm thinking maybe I'll use for a shirt. It's just a cool little skull. It says good luck, fingers crossed. But I want to see what it would look like if it was a little bit grittier, and I feel like this would be a good option for this. So I'm gonna do it in a couple pieces so that I have some options and some more variety and texture. What I'll start with is maybe just the white stuff, because I wanna do it on a black background, I think. What I'm gonna do is select the white, put that on its own layer, and then I'm gonna fill it in black because we need the black toner, so it's gonna be the reverse, and then when we bring it back in Fresco, we could change the color. All right, so I have the white on its own layer. I'm just gonna go ahead and load that as a selection, and then I can turn everything else off. And then I'll make a new layer, and then I'll just go to select black, and I'm just gonna grab a giant brush and just fill it in. So we've got that, and now I'm just gonna go ahead and print that on the laser printer. So now that we did that, so that we have some options, maybe I'll do one with just the skull and the little fingers crossed thing. And then I'll do one with what will be the fill color of the luck lettering and the arm. Fill that in. And now we can print that. All right, I'm gonna get set up and we'll transfer this. All right, so I got a bunch of laser prints to use to experiment with. I think I'll start with the skull first. I remembered after I sent them to print that ideally I would have reversed them because we're going to be flipping them over and transferring onto another sheet of paper, so they're going to be backwards. But it's not that big of a deal because we're going to bring them into Fresco anyway, and then once they're there, we can just transform it. No big deal. So what we want to do is put down another sheet of paper for it to transfer to, but then I'm going to tape them both to the table. That way I can check to see how the transfer looks, and if maybe there's an area I missed, I didn't fully go through, I can just put it back down and not have it shift and mess the transfer up. So I got this Blender marker. It's an ad marker brand, Blender. So I think these are just used for blending colors when you're coloring with markers. But you're just gonna marker over your artwork and you'll see it get dark as the paper gets wet with whatever this stinkiness is. It's very stinky. I don't recommend doing it in an enclosed area like I am. I actually learned this technique back in my graphic design days. I worked at this small studio and we did a lot of branding and also did a lot of stuff for the music industry. And we were always trying to like make our graphics look a little grittier, a little punker. And one of the ways we did it was like this. We would, if there was a logo or something like that and we wanted to distress it, we would do this transfer technique and then scan it back in. And then if it needed to be vector, for example, it was a logo or something like that, we would clean it up a little bit in Photoshop and then either live trace it or use like this old software called Trace or something like that. But the plan for today is to skip all that by just using the capture thing. It won't be as precise because it won't be a scan, but iPhone cameras are pretty great these days. So that looks just like I wanted it to. It's a nice texture. Cool. Figured we could do a few of these and then bring them all in and have some variety to choose from. At that design studio that I worked at, we would do this in this little office that we called Scannyville because that's where the scanner was. It was not ventilated and it was pretty smelly. I can't imagine how smelly it was based on how smelly this is, and this is in a much less confined space. That looks pretty cool. I like that. 2 down. Gonna do this skull. They're running out of steam. Maybe we'll get a cool effect out of it. Oh, it looks pretty cool. I think this actually might be good because it's gonna be the fill, so maybe we want some extra texture in there. Let's just do one more version of look, so we have some options. Maybe we could like layer them, because the texture will be a little bit different. That's something. It's kind of cool. So I guess in a perfect world, I would set it up on a tripod so it's like perfectly the same for each, but because I'm going for imperfection, I'll just wing it. So I'll tap on create, and then I'll go to shapes, and then create, and then we just capture it in here. It looks like we've got this adjuster to sort of control how much texture we're getting. That looks pretty good. Okay, that's pretty neat. So I think we can just save it. And this is gonna save it to a shape, so when we go into Fresco, we'll be able to pull that up as a selection and then we could fill it with vector. So I will, well, you'll see that when we get there. All right, so I'm back over in Fresco, and to get these things that we just made, we're gonna come over to the shapes in our toolbar, which is the little triangle circle thing. You'll see some categories. I think comics is probably the only one you'll see except for capture, and capture will be the things that we just made. It may take a little bit for them to show up, but it looks like mine are all here. So all you'll do is select one of these things and it makes this shape. It's like translucent. And you can scale it however big you want. And then you can tap fill, the bottom, and you can choose pixel or vector. So if we choose vector, it's gonna fill it in with vector art. And now we've got this like authentic vector texture, which, you know, you can't really get these kind of textures in Fresco with vector brushes. So this is pretty rad. And then we've got this extra grit down here. We could like copy and paste that and use that as a separate thing. So we can just edit this like it's regular vector art at this point. So I'm gonna come in over here and I'm gonna grab the lasso and I'm just gonna select this, all this extra stuff, and I'm gonna go to cut selection, then paste selection, and then we could have control over that and use it on its own. I think this stuff up here is a bit much, so we can just kind of come in and erase some of that. We use the vector brush and tap the modifier, we can use it as an eraser. And I can just erase some of this extra stuff that I don't want. I think a little bit would be okay, but some of it was just too much, and that was from me lifting up the paper before it was really dry. Got a bunch of extra grit up here, which is a nice little thing, because we can use it. It's like got all this extra fun stuff. So I'm just gonna select all that. I'm gonna go to cut selection, and then paste selection, and now we've got just a bunch of extra cool grit, and this looks good. I'm pretty happy with this. So let's do another one. Come over to shapes, then we'll choose, let's choose this fill option. Oh, this is the one with the ripped paper. That's kind of cool. Fill this one a different color because it's like a interior thing. So I'm gonna fill this one with white because I want it to be white on black background. That's my idea for what the final design will be. So let me just make a layer with a black background. And that's kind of sick. TBH. All right, let's look at what other fun stuff we got in here. Luck lettering, fill this one black, so we just go to fill. Make sure you make a new layer first. Sweet. So I'm gonna play around with these, see if I can make something fun, and I'll check back in with you. This is a pretty cool process. All right, so I'm gonna pop up a little time lapse of me noodling around with these different vector shapes that we captured using that transfer technique. I went ahead and did one more after the stuff I recorded earlier, and that was just a rectangle that I did a transfer with just to get like a little bit of a background texture. When I brought it in, I felt like the texture that I had captured was a little too big. So what I did was I just duplicated it 4 times and then sort of like flipped horizontally and vertical each of them and just sort of offset them and put them together in a way that the pattern didn't look like it was repeating. And actually then layered it with another one because I did 2 captures with different amounts of, you know, you can control the contrast of the capture. And I think it turned out pretty cool. I think this is a fun way to get some more organic looking vector art into Adobe Fresco. With the default vector brushes, you are sort of limited in the kind of texture that you can create without manually making little dots. I have sort of pushed the limits of that with my vector presets for the gritty vector ones, but you can only do so much when you can't import actual vector shapes to use with the brushes. So this is definitely a cool and fun way to do that and bring in some gritty vector into Fresco. This was fun. I think maybe I'll use this more when I need to create some vector artwork that wants to have a little bit of a punk rock, distressed, vintage edge to it. If you've been watching this and thought, hey, this is pretty cool, but I don't know what the hootin' heck vector is, I have just the video for you. And this other video explains what vector art is, how you can make it, why you might want your art to be vector, and it's a lot of fun. I think you should check it out, and I will see you soon. Good talk.